to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord Thank you. Thank you.
Once again, President Trump seems to be trying to fulfill a solemn duty to Russia. The two biggest beneficiaries of President Trump's action today are Russia and the very first foreign country that he visited, Saudi Arabia. Both of those countries have oil-dependent economies. They are both now struggling to find ways together to maintain the price of oil at a high enough level to sustain their economies. There's really only one way to do that that works. The bad way to do it is to try to restrict the supply of oil, thereby driving up the price. But that's much harder to do than people think when they try to start it, as OPEC has discovered many, many times. The best way to do it, the very, very best way to do it, is to increase demand for oil and to drive up the price by increased demand. That is classical economics. The Paris Climate Accord is designed to decrease demand for oil. Here is what the leader of the free world said tonight about the United States dropping out of the Paris Climate Accord.
Tonight, I wish to tell the United States, France believes in you. The world believes in you. I know that you are a great nation. I know your history, our common history. France will not give up the fight. I reaffirm clearly that the Paris Agreement remains irreversible and will be implemented not just by France, but by all the other nations. We will succeed because we are fully committed. Because wherever we live, whoever we are, we all share the same responsibility. Make our planet great again.
We're joined now by Dan Rather, former anchor of CBS Evening News and currently the host of AXS TV's The Big Interview. Dan, considering all the presidents you've covered, all of whom have carried the label with them around the world as leader of the free world, to see this tonight, to see the president pull the United States out of a worldwide agreement, see the president of France then step up, specifically speak in English to address the United States of America with a leadership tone on his part about where our future lies in climate and other things. Just an extraordinary moment.
Well, it's a momentous moment and a very ominous moment because depending on how far President Trump can go and how effective he may be the rest of the way, this can make the United States second tier in terms of world leadership, at least on this subject. And by the way, I totally agree that Russia and Saudi Arabia are the big winners here, but also China is a big winner because the Chinese they seek to spread their influence, particularly in Western Europe, do business there. Chinese are big winners. Steve Bannon is a big winner. Steve Bannon is back big time in the White House. In the showdown in the White House between the globalists and the nationalists, Steve Bannon and the nationalists won. But I do think, Lawrence, that there's something else at work here with President Trump. And William Marshall wrote some of this on the internet today. And that is, from the outside looking in, it seems clear that he's mad, he has some rage, he's scared. What did he do with Russia narrative is closing in on him. Still, the investigations about his tax returns, which you know a lot, are closing in on him. He just came back from this European trip and he was angry with the leader of Germany, Ms. Merkel, and the new leader of France. So what you have here is a president who's lashing out in anger. We haven't had a president this psychologically troubled. I'm trying to use my language very carefully. We haven't had a president this psychologically troubled in this way since at least Richard Nixon.
Yes.
And remember, we're still very early in the Trump presidency. But this decision today history is going to punish Donald Trump for this decision. And the question is, how much will it punish our own country? Now, that may depend on how much of the slack that they can take up, that individual state governments, local governments, and people who know, including corporations, who know this is a bad decision, try to resist it. But, you know, the presidency is very strong, and when he makes this kind of decision, there are consequences. There are consequences of an election. He was elected. There are consequences of these kinds of decisions. But I do think that it's time for us to take a deep breath, be calm, be steady about it. Over the long pull, we'll probably be all right. That no president is stronger than the whole country, and this is not a popular decision in the country. It is popular with some President Trump's core supporters, and you can argue that's another reason he did it, that he needs to nourish his core support.
Has to give them something.
Yeah, it has to give them something. But, you know, pulling back what we call in television the wide shot, that President Trump may as well be showing up in the Oval Office in spats and saying he's going to increase the manufacture of buggy whips.
Yes, yes. Or horseshoes.
Make this decision,
yes.
Or horseshoes.
Right, right. Yeah. Washington Post reporting, as we began talking, Dan, something about the president and President Macron. The White House aide or aides are quoted in the Washington Post tonight as saying, hearing smack talk from the Frenchman, 31 years his junior, irritated and bewildered Trump. And so it seems we may be developing an enemies list in this White House, which we had in the Nixon White House, but this enemies list is going to have heads of state on it, like President Macron and Angela Merkel.
Well, let's quote the White House here. A bewildered President
yes.
Trump, it says it so. And here again, the Russians are smiling, the Chinese are smiling. When they see this statement from the White House, their smile will broaden, because they seek to disrupt these historic alliances that have kept the peace by and large for the better part of a century. It's important to the Russians and the Chinese that they undermine these alliances we have with NATO, the European Union, these various countries in Europe and elsewhere. And to see this kind of talk from the White House when, by the way, the French president was speaking English, as you pointed out, at the point, I would be delighted to see President Trump speak to the French people in French, but it may be a while before you start to hear that.
Dan, we're always, as these stories develop, we're always taking our Watergate temperature, which is something that you lived through. It had a rhythm to it. There was a news rhythm to it, the way the stories broke. The rhythm to this seems much faster. I mean, you'd remember it better than I would. But I mean, the New York Times and the Washington Post breaking stories by the hour, by the day. This story has changed dramatically every day.
Well, the rhythm and the pace of it is much faster than Watergate. And also, remember, Watergate came to a climax during Richard Nixon's second term.
Yes.
Again, we're still early in the Trump presidency. But the news business has changed so much, technology has advanced so much, that it's much quicker now. And the question that goes unanswered, I, for one, have no idea where this leads. Is the open question, because you're quite right. It isn't just a drip, it's almost a steady stream of one story after another. And, you know, thank heaven and other powers that may be for the Washington Post and the New York Times and other news enterprises that have been breaking these stories. But this is why I say, and I think the White House has confirmed tonight, that President Trump, he's bewildered. What was the old word they used? You know, irritated and bewildered. Bewildered, irritated. And I think he's beginning to realize he's in over his head. He came in very confident as a business leader. But being president is not just being a CEO. For one thing, when you're a CEO, you pick up the phone and tell somebody to do something, you have to do it. In a democratic system, can't do that.
And some of the weaknesses that this White House has that the Nixon White House didn't have is no one ever said a bad word about President Nixon's son-in-laws.
No, that's true. No. Well, I hesitate to laugh about it because it's serious, and I think it needs to be said that the son-in-law has not been proven guilty of anything. But again, when we talk about President Trump being irritated, bewildered, mad, angry, and enraged, hearing his son-in-law, whom he apparently likes very much and is in very tight and knows an awful lot, Again, the narrative, almost daily, this, an addition to the narrative, a lot of questions to ask about the son-in-law. What did he know? When did he know it? With whom he met? There was another development of it today. And I wouldn't be surprised, I'm not predicting, I wouldn't be surprised if President Trump at some point took the advice of some members of his staff who've been suggesting the son-in-law perhaps ought to take himself off the line for a while. But all of this is getting very, very serious, not just for President Trump and the future of his presidency, but for the country as a whole. And now I come back to this decision about pulling out of the Paris Accords. There's an old saying in the Marine Corps, if you can't pick up the cadence, you better check your own step, which is a way of saying everybody in the world is signing on this thing except Syria and Nicaragua.
Yeah.
And if the United States of America is to remain in a leadership role on this and other issues, we can't just stand with Nicaragua and Syria.
America first. America first.
America first.